AITA for refusing to forgive my family after they abandoned me over a false claim? My name is Jacob. I'm 34 years old, and I live in the United States, in a state I'd rather not name for privacy reasons. I've spent almost a decade trying to bury a past that haunts me. My ex-girlfriend falsely accused me of something terrible, and my own family turned their backs on me. First, let me clarify that I was born and raised in a small town near Kansas City, where my parents, Antoine, my father, and Camille, my mother, ran a family restaurant. My childhood was more or less happy, like anyone who spends their afternoons playing ball in the street with friends. I was the oldest of three. After me came Eilish, who was always my mother's spoiled child, and Audrey, the youngest, whom we all saw as the darling of the house. When I started college, I wanted to study sociology. I decided to move to a campus near St. Louis for the full college experience. There I met Layla, a literature student. We started dating in my sophomore year. We were the typical college couple, partying on weekends and studying in the library during the week. We planned to rent an apartment together after graduation. And, although in retrospect I see that we had our differences, back then I felt in love and committed to her. However, during my senior year, I noticed strange behavior from Layla. She would be absent for days, inventing stories about family gatherings that didn't make sense, and I began to suspect she was seeing someone else. One night, when I couldn't take it anymore, I confronted her directly. I told her I was tired of her lies, that I wanted her to be honest with me. She became hysterical, screaming as if I were hurting her, and ran out of the apartment we were renting at the time. The next day, I got a call from the local police station. Layla had filed a horrible complaint against me, accusing me of inappropriate behavior towards her. It was such a blow that I was speechless. I never touched her without her consent. What's more, when we argued, I preferred to go for a walk rather than lose my temper. But, within a couple of days, the rumors spread through the university. I was called in for questioning, and my reputation was shattered. The worst came when my parents found out. I was sure my family would support me, as they knew what kind of person I was. But they didn't. My father, Antoine, seemed to believe the gossip immediately and told me over the phone, "If that's true, you're not my son." I froze. My mother, Camille, didn't even call me at that time. She just sent me a terse message. "I hope what they say isn't true, but don't come home until everything is cleared up." And Eilish, my brother, sent me a neutral email saying he hoped it was a misunderstanding. And Audrey, the youngest, was only 15 and didn't know what to think. I was left alone, without any real family support. To make matters worse, the university, although they didn't formally expel me, there wasn't a single shred of solid evidence against me, forbade me from attending in-person classes until the situation was resolved. How are you supposed to prove your innocence when people already believe the worst? For 2 months, I went to give statements, handing over my phone, my chat conversations, my planner. Everything, just to clear my name. They never found anything to indicate that I had assaulted Layla, because, quite simply, it was false. Still, the process was exhausting. Many friends disappeared. I was in financial trouble because I lost my part-time job at the campus library. No one wanted to be associated with someone under such an accusation. To top it all off, in the town where I grew up, the rumors spread like wildfire. I received anonymous messages calling me a monster, and my parents said they didn't want anything to do with me until it all ended in a trial. It never went to trial, as the prosecution didn't find enough evidence to charge me. However, that case closed didn't exonerate me in the eyes of my family. They kept saying there had been no trial or conviction, but also no clear verdict of innocence. Literally, you got away with it due to lack of evidence. That's when I hit rock bottom. I remember my mother sending me a rather cold voice note saying she preferred that I not return home, because people in the neighborhood were talking and she couldn't bear the shame. That destroyed me. My father didn't even write to me. His silence was more painful than any insult. And Eilish cut off all communication with me, probably so as not to antagonize my parents. And Audrey, being a teenager, didn't have much freedom to choose sides. I was completely alone, except for 1 or 2 college friends who still believed in me. That's when I decided to escape. I took the little money I had, packed my basic belongings in an old car, a sedan I nicknamed Betsy, and left that state without looking back. I was 22 years old, with no fixed place to go, and a heart full of resentment. I drove for several days, stopping at cheap motels, until I reached Denver, Colorado, where an old high school classmate offered me a couch to sleep on while I sent out resumes left and right. I held on with temporary jobs, coffee shops, cleaning, whatever it took to earn some money. During that time, no one from my family looked for me. Not even a, "Are you okay?" I, for my part, preferred not to call them. It pained me to admit it, but that family breakup shook all my convictions. Aren't families supposed to support you in the worst of times? Why did they believe me guilty without even hearing my side of the story? As the months passed, anger gave way to resignation. I told myself that someday I would show them they were hypocrites, but, at the same time, I knew I couldn't live anchored to that hate. The only thing left for me was to build my future from scratch, without them. After settling in Denver for a few months, my main concern was survival, especially shaking off the shadow of Layla's accusation. Living without my family support was hard, and it took me a while to adjust to the idea that I was alone to face any eventuality. Still, I repeated to myself every morning that I wasn't going to give up. If the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally turned their backs on me, then the only thing left was to prove to them, and to myself, that I could succeed on my own. To survive, I started working in a couple of local coffee shops. One hired me as a barista, and at another, I did cleaning shifts at night. The first year in Denver was a constant challenge. I slept on the couch of my old high school classmate, Savannah, who had offered me a corner in her apartment. Although I was grateful, I also felt uncomfortable imposing on her space. So, from day one, my goal was to save enough to rent a studio and later, resume my college studies at another institution where they didn't know me because of that unfounded scandal. Around that time, one of my few friends from college in St. Louis, Hudson, contacted me. He had also distanced himself when Layla's accusation came to light, but later reconsidered. He messaged me on social media to ask how I was and if I needed anything. It was a gesture that, although belated, touched me. I told him my situation, and he offered to send me some sociology notes that could be useful if I ever went back to college. He even suggested that I change my username on social media and keep a low profile to avoid the curiosity of strangers and my family in case they were looking for traces of me. Honestly, that idea didn't seem so bad. At that point, part of me was even thinking about legally changing my name to start over completely. As the months went by, I learned to love Denver. Its mountainous landscape and laid-back culture offered me a kind of freedom I had never experienced. No one knew my past or my supposed blemishes. I could be Jacob, the barista who told bad jokes to customers, and no one judged me by unfounded rumors. So, with some emotional therapy, which I was able to access through a community program, I set out to recover my studies. However, I needed more money. Thanks to some contacts I made through Savannah, I got a part-time job at the local public library. The pay was low, but at least it gave me some free time to study. Above all, I was surrounded by books. I spent my afternoons organizing shelves, advising people looking for references, and dealing with the children who came to the children's room. It was much better than spending the night cleaning coffee shops, although I didn't quit my other jobs all at once. I juggled schedules to earn as much as possible and gradually get out of the financial hole. Meanwhile, my family still showed no signs of life, which both hurt and relieved me. My pride wouldn't let me call or message them. I felt that if they didn't take the first step, I wasn't going to beg for their attention. Maybe they thought that, because there hadn't been a trial, the accusation still hung in the air. Even though it was clear that there was no evidence of my crime, my parents preferred to believe the worst, or at least avoid public shame. Deep down, I was fed up with their cowardice and lack of trust in me. Things took a somewhat positive turn when, after saving for a year and a half, I found a small studio near downtown. It wasn't luxurious, a main room that served as living room, kitchen, and bedroom, with an adjoining bathroom. But it had something better than any luxury. It was mine, my personal space. The day I signed the lease, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was as if I finally had the opportunity to build a home, even if it was simple and in an old building. Once settled in my studio, I decided to revisit the idea of returning to college. I enrolled in a community college with the option of transferring to a sociology program at a prestigious institution within Colorado. Transferring credits was tedious, but I did it. I started taking night classes and weekend classes, balancing my part-time job at the library, some extra shifts at the coffee shop, and my university studies. I practically had no time to socialize or think about the past. It was during this period of my life that something unexpected happened. I met Lucy, a young woman from California who had come to Denver to study social work. We met in one of my research methods classes, and we clicked almost immediately, because of our shared taste in classic movies. At first, I kept my distance. Carrying that accusation from my ex and the betrayal of my family had ruined my faith in relationships. I had no intention of getting involved with anyone. However, Lucy was so patient and understanding that I couldn't help but open up a little more. On a casual outing to the movies, I confessed to her, without many details, that my family and I were estranged due to a big problem from my past. She nodded without judging and told me that if I ever wanted to tell her more, she would be willing to listen without condemning me. That was the first step. Shortly after, we became more than friends. I fell in love with the way she looked at me without prejudice, her quiet laughter, and the way she supported those around her. I'm not going to pretend it was all smooth sailing. At first, I was wary of even a simple hug. I remembered how Layla had accused me of something so atrocious and how my parents had turned their backs on me. I was terrified of the idea of someone raising a false accusation again. Lucy, with enormous patience, respected my pace. She invited me to her house to eat with her roommates. She listened to me vent about my fears, and little by little, I told her the details of that false accusation that destroyed my life. She looked at me with sadness, and, instead of pitying me, she offered me encouragement. You are not your traumas, Jacob. You deserve love and a new life. Those words stuck with me. Gradually, I regained the ability to smile, to feel valuable. Lucy, without meaning to, became the family I was missing. Meanwhile, the relationship with my parents, Antoine and Camille, remained in limbo. And Eilish and Audrey were also still gone. Sometimes I wondered if they were in contact with Layla, or maybe they just had their heads buried in the sand. So, at 26, I finally graduated with a degree in sociology. Lucy graduated from social work around the same time, and we decided to take the next step. Move in together to a slightly larger apartment. That's when the ghost of my family reappeared, although in a very tangential way. A childhood friend messaged me on Facebook telling me that my parents had asked about me at a community gathering in Kansas City, as if they wanted to know where I was and what had become of my life. They didn't look for me directly, but the mere fact that they asked about me already created a knot in my stomach. Lucy noticed my nervousness. She said that if my parents wanted to make amends, they could contact me through my social media or my phone, which, after all, was the same old number. But the reality was that, after more than 3 years of silence, I didn't know if I wanted to open that door. I had suffered too much waiting for support that never came. Time went on. I went back to my routine. I got a stable job at a public policy research office. Nothing glamorous, but it allowed me to have a steady income. And, with Lucy working at a community aid organization, we started to plan for a long-term future. Eventually, I worked up the courage and proposed to her one afternoon while walking through a park near the Rocky Mountains. She said yes, crying with emotion. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. For a second, I thought of my parents, Eilish, Audrey, how sad it was that they weren't there to share that moment. But I remembered that they had marginalized themselves by believing Layla's lies. We planned to get married in a small ceremony, with some friends and coworkers, in a botanical garden in the city. Nothing ostentatious, but with the warmth of those who truly loved us. However, life gives surprises, and I received an even bigger one. Lucy got pregnant shortly before the wedding. It was news that filled us with joy, and, at the same time, made us reevaluate our plans. We agreed to postpone the wedding until after the birth. So, when our first son, whom we decided to name Yen, was born, neither my parents nor my siblings were aware. I didn't want to open myself up to the drama of a family reunion that, at that point, seemed forced. The following years passed like a sigh. Lucy and I built, through effort, a warm home. We traveled, shared holidays with her parents, my father-in-law, Jackson, and my mother-in-law, Nora, two wonderful people who welcomed me as a son, and ended up moving to another city for better job opportunities. Our first son, Yen, grew up among hugs, laughter, and the tranquility of a united family. And, shortly after, our second daughter, Charlotte, arrived. Deep down, I still felt a void for the family I left behind, but it was getting lighter. I felt that if they never returned, I could live with it, because life had given me a second chance. It had shown me that you can be happy despite the worst rejection. What I never imagined is that, after so many years, my family would try to come back to me. The night my father showed up at my door was one of the most disconcerting of my life. It had been about 8 years since the last time I heard Antoine's voice, and I never imagined seeing him in person again, much less thousands of miles away from the small town where I grew up. That afternoon, I was in the living room, playing video games with my son, Yin, while Lucy and our daughter, Charlotte, were picking up toys in the backyard. Suddenly, the doorbell rang insistently. At first I assumed it would be the food delivery guy or a neighbor, but when I opened the door, my heart almost jumped out of my mouth. There stood my father, with a nervous look on his face, trying to force a smile. The shock was so great that, for a few seconds, I was speechless. It seemed to me that my father had also aged noticeably. His gray hair had multiplied, and his face, once serious and proud, looked tired, with more pronounced wrinkles. He barely recognized me. The first thing I did was ask, almost uncontrollably, "What are you doing here?" He opened his mouth without making a sound at first. Then, he leaned towards me slightly and replied, "I just want to talk. Can I come in?" I didn't know what to do. My instinctive reaction was to slam the door shut, just as I had done long ago in my worst nightmares. But I remembered that Yin was there, looking at me curiously. I didn't want to scare my son or give him the image of a violent father. Also, Lucy could walk in at any moment and find us in the middle of a confrontation. I stood in the doorway, blocking his way, and felt a terrible uneasiness in my stomach. "I don't know if it's a good idea for you to come in. My family," I said with a trembling voice, "my family is different now." My father nodded, head down, as if expecting that rejection. However, he insisted, "Please, give me a few minutes. It took me a long time to find you, Jacob. I traveled half the country to see you. It's not that I'm coming to demand anything from you. I just need to talk, to explain." There were too many questions swirling in my head. How did he find out where I lived? Why did he decide to come all the way to Denver, or the new city we were in, after so many years of silence? Why didn't he contact me before, by phone or email? Each of these doubts generated a mixture of anger and confusion. I thought of Lucy and the children, how peaceful my life had been since I distanced myself from the family that abandoned me. The last person I wanted to see at my door was my father. But, at the same time, a small part of me longed to know what story he brought. Just then, Yin, innocent as all children his age, came to the door and blurted out, "Dad, who is that man?" My father looked at him with a gleam of emotion in his eyes, as if he couldn't believe he had his own grandson before him. It was at that moment that I realized the magnitude of the situation. My father, the man who repudiated me when I needed him most, was now showing up at my home, looking at my son with longing. I felt a lump in my throat. I swallowed and asked Yin to go to his room to get his toys, telling him that I needed to talk to that man for a moment. When my son left, I told my father to wait outside. I closed the door, took a deep breath, and walked to the living room, where Lucy was already coming in with Charlotte in her arms. Her expression reflected concern as soon as she saw my face. "What's wrong?" she asked urgently. It's my father," I stammered. "He wants to talk to me." Lucy frowned, indignant. She knew, in general terms, the story of how my family had turned their backs on me. We had talked a couple of times about the possibility of them reappearing, but I never really thought it was feasible. She took my hand and asked me to stay calm. "If you want to talk to him here, that's fine. If you'd rather do it outside, that's fine too. But don't let him hurt you. You have the right to be furious." I thanked her with a look. I steeled myself and opened the door again. There stood my father, standing there, his hands sweaty. On the verge of tears, I said, "Come in, but keep your voice down and don't approach my children until I tell you to." "Understood." "Understood," he agreed, swallowing. He entered the living room and saw Lucy holding our daughter. He nodded shyly, as a greeting, and Lucy just gave him a serious look. Without preamble, he asked me to listen to him. His anxiety was evident in the way he scratched the back of his neck and checked his phone from time to time. "Jacob, I'm sorry for everything that happened, son." He began, not finding the words. I didn't know what I was getting into when I believed Layla's lies. "And what's changed now?" I cut him off coldly. 8 years, Dad. 8 years without looking for me, without calling me, without asking how I was. Do you really think I'm sorry covers that? For a moment, my father lowered his gaze and pulled something out of his pocket, a small crumpled piece of paper. Lucy watched me with concern, fearing it might be some kind of trick. But my father unfolded the paper and stared at it as if it were a script. "I ran into Layla a few months ago, He began to explain. She contacted me because, well, supposedly she felt guilty about everything. She asked me to help her with some procedures on her phone, to delete some old messages, and that's how I discovered that she had been talking to the person she cheated on you with. They confessed their guilt for having destroyed your life. They said they never thought the lie would get out of control, that you would end up being ostracized by the family. And just now it occurred to you to believe me, I interrupted, feeling my eyes burning. The authorities didn't find any evidence, but you and Mom decided I was guilty anyway. You kicked me out of the house. You ignored me. Now you come saying that Layla confessed her lie. And you want, what, exactly? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? My father nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I could see that he was genuinely heartbroken. He confessed that my mother, Camille, couldn't bear the idea of facing me after realizing they had been wrong about me. He had undertaken the search, only fearing that I would reject him. But he said he dared to take the step out of true repentance. He talked about my brother, Ailesh, and my sister, Audrey, mentioning that they were ashamed of having remained silent. Apparently, my father had contacted some of my former college classmates to track down my whereabouts, and that's how he ended up finding my current address. Suddenly, I noticed that Lucy was taking Charlotte to the kitchen to give us some privacy. My father took a step closer, trying to lower his voice. Jacob, I know there's no way to erase what happened, but I'd like to at least meet my grandchildren, tell them their grandfather is sorry. And I also wanted to tell you, face to face, that I'm sorry I didn't defend you when I should have. I crossed my arms, struggling with my emotions. Part of me wanted to yell at him to leave and never come back. Another part remembered the few good times from my childhood, when we went fishing or played baseball in the backyard. The wound was still open, but I had to admit that his presence there, humiliated and crying, stirred something inside me. And Mom, I asked, finally, is she also sorry, or did she send you to make herself look good? He sighed. Your mother is very ashamed. She doesn't even dare to write to you. She feels that she failed you. And my father stopped, as if he didn't know how to justify her. I at least took responsibility for my actions and came to tell you directly. No one forced me, son. No one. Rage flooded me. I remembered all the nights of loneliness, the hunger, the fear, the shame of no one believing me. However, there was also Lucy, my son Yin, my daughter Charlotte. My life had taken a complete turn. I had a job, a family that did support me. What did I gain by trusting my parents again? Look, I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, with a lump in my throat. It took me years to get over what you did to me, and I'm not sure I want to reopen that wound. Now I have a family, Lucy and my children. They don't deserve to be involved in this drama. My father looked at me with sad eyes, but nodded slowly. I understand. I know my apologies are late, but I wanted to try, even if it's just to tell you that I believe in you, and that I regret the pain I caused you. I don't expect you to accept me overnight. I just wanted you to hear my truth. At that moment, I noticed Yin peeking from the hallway, curiously. Lucy was following close behind. My father noticed and kept his distance, waiting for my permission to approach. For the first time, I felt a slight glimmer of compassion. Despite everything, he was their grandfather. I closed my eyes for a moment and sighed, trying to calm the fury. I turned to Yin and explained, Son, this is someone from my past. We're talking. Why don't you go to your room and then we'll watch a movie together? Huh. Yin shrugged and disappeared down the hall. Lucy came closer, holding Charlotte's hand firmly, and looked at me, as if asking me what I wanted to do. My father also looked at her, making a sign of respect, understanding that Lucy was the strength that had sustained me all these years. I'm going to have to think about it, I told my father. I don't know if I want to reconcile. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm not going to kick you out today. Stay at a hotel and we'll talk later. My father dropped his shoulders in relief. He nodded and gave me his phone number, written on a piece of paper. When he left, I stood at the door, feeling tremendously dizzy. Lucy hugged me and asked, in a low voice, if I was okay. I told her I wasn't, but that I needed to process the situation. She offered to call her father or her friends to support me. I appreciated the gesture and we sat on the couch, hugging, while Charlotte played with a stuffed animal and Yin called for attention from his room. My mind was racing. Had my father really discovered the truth about Layla? Why had it taken him so many years? How would I face my mother and my siblings? I had built a whole life with Lucy, far from the people who betrayed me. Was it worth risking my peace of mind? That night I couldn't sleep. I thought about the old days, about the arguments with Layla, about the loneliness of being rejected by my own family. I didn't sleep a wink all night. The image of my father standing at the door, begging for a second chance, kept me tossing and turning in bed. At dawn, I got up quietly so as not to wake Lucy or the children and sat in the living room, my coffee cup shaking in my hands. I looked towards the door, as if expecting my father to knock again, although I knew he had gone to a nearby hotel. The thought resonated in my head that he was in the same city after 8 long years of absence, and I didn't know if I felt anger, relief, curiosity, or all of it at once. Lucy got up a while later, and, seeing me so absorbed, she asked me gently if I was ready to make a decision. I told her no, that I needed to organize my thoughts before facing my father again. She, with her characteristic serenity, kissed my forehead and assured me that she would support me, no matter what happened. Then, she prepared a light breakfast for Yin and Charlotte and kept them occupied while I struggled with a whirlwind of emotions. After much hesitation, I chose to dial the number my father had given me the night before. He answered immediately, as if he had been waiting for my call with the phone in his hand. He asked me, timidly, if I wanted to meet in a neutral place to talk more calmly. I suggested meeting at a downtown coffee shop, thus avoiding bringing him back to my house. I still shuddered at the image of him walking around my living room as if he could claim a life that didn't belong to him. Lucy offered to drive me in her car and stay nearby in case I needed to escape from a confrontation that was too intense. At first, I hesitated. I felt like it was a personal matter. But then I realized that her company gave me security. So I let her drive to the coffee shop, where she stayed in the parking lot with the children, watching a movie on the tablet. I went in and recognized my father immediately. He was sitting at a table near the window, nervously stirring a now-cold cappuccino. We greeted each other without effusiveness, rather with a tense gesture. We sat facing each other, and there was an awkward silence. The waiter asked me what I wanted, and I ordered a black coffee. I noticed that my father's eyes were red, as if he had been crying or hadn't slept all night. "Thank you for coming," he murmured softly, looking at his cup. "It means a lot to me." "I'm not doing it for you," I replied, trying not to sound aggressive. "I'm doing it to clear things up." I took a breath. "Where do we begin?" I decided to get straight to the point. "Yesterday, you told me that Layla contacted you, that you discovered the messages where she confessed her lie. Can you explain to me how that was? What led you to believe her and not me all these years?" My father flinched, swallowed, and began to recount. After the scandal broke out at the university, Layla had told my parents a twisted version, full of supposed evidence that she never showed to the police. She hinted that I had threatened her so she wouldn't report it sooner. My parents, fearing a possible scandal in our town, preferred to keep quiet. He said they felt cornered by the situation and that they isolated themselves, especially when, at the local police station, they couldn't find clear evidence for my arrest. I listened in silence, feeling a rage so intense that my jaw hurt from clenching my teeth. "And what happened after I left?" I inquired. "Because I left, and none of you made any attempt to look for me." My father sighed, his gaze fixed on the table. "Your mother and I argued many times. She said that maybe we had rushed things, that there was no trial or anything. But, in town, people were talking." And he rubbed his temples. "I was a coward, I admit it. I didn't want to face the possibility that it was true. I clung to the idea of there's a reason the police didn't let you go immediately, even though, in reality, you were never formally charged. Little by little, we let time go by. You stopped writing, so did we. And when we wanted to contact you, we had no way." "You had no way because you never tried?" I interrupted, unable to contain my frustration. "Really, my phone number was the same. And, although I changed my address, my email was still active." "I know, Jacob, I know," he said, his voice breaking. "We made one mistake after another. There's no excuse that can compensate you for the pain you went through." Feeling tears welling up, I preferred to focus the conversation on another point. "Why did Layla ask you to delete messages from her phone?" "It sounds very strange." My father explained that, apparently, Layla had been left with some remorse. She had tried to find peace in 1,000 ways, but she didn't dare contact me. Somehow, she kept in touch with my parents to hear about me. And it was in one of those conversations that Layla asked him for a favor, to delete some compromising texts before renewing her cell phone. That's how my father discovered the chats that Layla exchanged with the man she cheated on me with. In those chats, they admitted to having ruined my life. She mentioned that she regretted the accusation because, in reality, she never thought the situation would go so far. And my father, after reading that, was devastated. "But why did you kick me out of your life without even confirming anything with me?" I thought, with an unbearable knot in my stomach. "Jacob, I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued. "I wanted you to know that I feel guilty, and that your mother, your siblings, we all understand now that you were telling the truth. And seeing how you've built a family, how you have children." His voice broke. "It hurts me to know that I missed all that." I remained silent for several seconds. I felt like yelling at him that the pain wasn't compensated by a belated, "I'm sorry," that I had forged my real family myself, with Lucy, with my children, with my in-laws, who welcomed me without judgment. But, at the same time, something in me still remembered the man who taught me to ride a bike as a child, who took me fishing, who gave me superhero comics for my birthday. It was a suffocating duality. As I was about to answer him, I saw through the window that Lucy was walking with Charlotte near the car. My daughter was playing with a small ball, and Lucy was guiding her so she wouldn't go into the street. That scene of my family brought me back to clarity. After a sip of coffee, I told my father, in a serious voice, "Look, it took me years to overcome what you did to me. I'm still not sure I've completely overcome it. I have a job, a wife, 2 wonderful children, and they don't deserve their father falling into a pit of anguish by reliving the past." "I know," he replied. "I just want a chance to explain to them, or to be close." I shook my head, feeling my pulse tremble. "That's not going to happen right away. I don't even know if you'll ever meet them. For now, don't even think about approaching Lucy or my children. I don't trust you enough to expose them to another disappointment." My father looked away, defeated. A heavy silence enveloped us. I could feel his pain, but my own pain was greater. The wound he had inflicted on me, along with my mother and my siblings, would not close with a simple sorry. I asked him to give me time. Maybe, if in the coming days I felt it was possible to build some kind of bridge, I would try. But for now, I didn't want him showing up at my door as if nothing had happened. "I'm at a hotel on the outskirts of town," he said, taking out a paper with the address. "If you ever want to talk, I'll be here for a couple more days. Then I'll go back to Kansas City." I put the paper in my pocket, without the slightest intention of using it immediately. I stood up, and he did the same. The goodbye was strange, like 2 strangers saying goodbye with a handshake. There was no hug. I wasn't ready for that contact. With a dry throat, I turned around and left the coffee shop. My father stayed inside, perhaps waiting to recover before leaving. Lucy, seeing me come out, met me with a questioning look. I explained, in a low voice, that I needed to go home. She and the children got in the car, and I drove back. During the drive, Ian asked me if I was sad. He noticed my serious expression. I told him I was just a little tired. Lucy squeezed my arm tenderly, offering me unconditional support. That afternoon, while Charlotte was napping and Lucy was reading Yen a story, I sat at the dining room table to reflect. Did my father, and the rest of my family, deserve to be a part of my life, after having judged me without evidence? Did I want that reunion, knowing all the damage they had caused me? I remembered every word he said, his regret, his shame, his desire to meet my children. And I was torn between resentment and the possibility of closing that chapter once and for all. Lucy watched me from the hallway, and, as if reading my mind, she approached me silently. She hugged me from behind and whispered in my ear, "Take your time. No one is forcing you to forgive. And, if you ever decide to let them into your life, let it be on your own terms." I nodded, holding back tears. I didn't know what the next step would be, but one thing was clear. If that family reunion were to happen, it would only be under conditions that protected my peace and that of my family. I had endured too many blows to expose myself to new wounds. I kept looking at the paper with the address of the hotel where my father was staying. Would I visit him? Would I make him return to Kansas City with the bitter taste of rejection? Would I notify my mother, demanding explanations? I tossed and turned with these questions until I fell asleep. The next day, I had to face my work routine and, somehow, continue with my life. However, a chapter from the past was now at my doorstep, and I had no idea whether I wanted to keep it closed or open it to see if something good could rise from the ashes. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.